Hey everyone, it's your girl Desiree, and I'm back with another video. We're continuing the series of growing up unprepared for womanhood. And in this one, we're going to talk about dating and intimacy, one of the juicy topics. I know we've already spoke about um, basically how to social climb and move socially in society. So we're just basically going to continue on with the other topics that was discussed in that original video. Also, Happy New Year. I hope that everything goes well for you this year as far as success, protection, sustainability, and all the different things that you desire in your life according to the path that you are set to go on. So I hope that everything goes well with that. So without further ado, like they would say, let's just go straight into the topic. So when it comes to dating and intimacy, this is like a big topic. A lot of people talk about it here on YouTube. They talk about it on Instagram, TikTok, all over the place because one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in life is who you date, who you have children with, who you marry, who you are intimate with, right? So these are very major decisions that you will make as a woman in your life. And it can literally destroy your life by laying down with the wrong men, by just simply dating the wrong man, by simply having children with the wrong man. And even if it is a man that's, a good, decent man, you still have to use discernment. You still have to have wisdom and strategy in how you go about things. And it's unfortunate, it would be nice if you could just date people and just let it happen naturally and you don't have to do all this planning and weeding out and vetting and all these different things, and everything would just kind of fall into place because you have good intentions, I have good intentions, you're healed, I'm healed. But that's not the reality of the world we live in. Like, a lot of us have things that we need to work on. We're also running into men who also have things to work on because no man is perfect. And the economy, everything is expensive, right? So if you want children, if you want a family, all these things have to be taken into consideration when you're going about making certain decisions. So you always had to vet, and you always had to be very um conscious of the decisions you were making when it came to dating and intimacy. But I believe that it's even more serious now because of the nature of society and the way that things are when it comes to dating, and, like I mentioned, with finances and all the other various things that's going to have an effect on your relationship when you are dating, and especially if you would decide to get married and spend the rest of your life with this person and bring children into it. So I think that this is very important, and some of us really weren't taught on basically how to basically date and intimacy and all that. We were kind of just, well, I could just speak for myself. I know for me, growing up in a religious home, I was kind of just taught, don't be intimate outside of marriage, because if you do, that's a sin. Don't bring any children in here. That's about it. Like, it really wasn't any guidance on like dating and how to set boundaries and how to vet. um, there really wasn't any real teachings on, yeah, there was some things that I was told to look out for, like if a men were, for example, if they try to isolate you from your family and your friends, that's a red flag. That could be a sign of potential harm or whatever. Or if he's like trying to control you, like trying to check your phone and prevent you from going outside, or, just certain things I kind of learned. And then me growing up in the household and witnessing certain things that men did that were harmful, that also kind of taught me of things to look out for. But that doesn't really help you as far as like the practical strategies on how to meet guys and date and go through all that. And then the times have also changed, right? So now there's online dating, as you can see with the picture that I use with Tinder. I never used Tinder. I had used Babu. I think it was Babu, something like that. And I met, I can't remember if I met more than one guy on there, but I know one guy that I dated, I met him on there, and he was, a pretty nice guy. It didn't end in the best way, but I didn't deal with any harm as far as physical harm or anything, because I know that's like a concern for a lot of women when they do online dating. I personally don't think I would do online dating now, at this stage of my life, if I was available and looking. But I think that back then it was also a little different. Not saying that it was like safe or anything, but I think that it was a little different. Now with the whole internet, things have really changed and you just have to be really careful. So I personally I'm not into the online dating thing anymore, but I know that it maybe works for some people. So that's like a whole nother conversation for another day. But I just think that it's important to be honest with yourself about whether you were taught how to date, how to be courted, if you want to get married, like the whole process of that. And if you weren't, maybe that can play a role in some of the challenges that you may have when it comes to dating and intimacy. So basically, when it comes to intimacy, I believe that a lot of times, well, first of all, let me say this. Society is very saturated with images and videos and what they would call corn right on here, because I know you can't say certain things, but there's a lot of intimacy issues. And I probably could still say it anyway because I'm not monetized, but there's a lot of issues that arise when there's so much perversion and oversaturation with sexuality and it just being perverse. I get it, like sexuality and intimacy and all that is natural, it's normal. But when it's oversaturated and is constantly thrown at you, and then it's also perverted, that can play a major role in the way that people relate with each other romantically when it comes to sexuality and intimacy. And we've seen a lot of those issues in our society with children that are being brought into a situation where the people are not even really in love, or there has not been a foundation that has been laid there yet. There really hasn't been any planning. It's just been kind of just, we're just, thugging it out. We're just rawing it out, no pun intended. And we're not really thinking about the consequences of the fact that you can bring a child into the world that has um, no choice, right, into coming into this world, and then now being brought into an environment that can potentially be toxic and unhealthy to parents that and values when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, when it comes to um, how to raise children, whether you even want children, whether you even want marriage, things like that. I believe are important financially. Like, are you a spender? Are you a saver? Are you an investor? Are you a woman who's very ambitious, but you're trying to date a guy who's not ambitious? He's just fine with the 9 to 5, and he has no um ambition to either rise up in that field or start his own thing on the side, or leave that and go on and create his own thing. Like, where is his ambition, right? So I think that all those things matter because you can't change people. And if you're going to spend your life with this person and create children with them, that's also going to affect how you're going to be able to agree and move together as a union so that you can raise your children on one accord, because it's very um, unhealthy for children when you're going one way and then the man is going this way, because y'all are so disconnected with your values and the way that you see things. And children are not stupid. They see when the parents don't agree. They see when the parents don't really want the child, or when they don't really want to deal with the stuff that comes with having children. Because I don't have any children, but I've seen how it is to handle children, um, even from my childhood, and being involved in child rearing and stuff like that. It's very time consuming. It's very taxing. It's very exhausting. And if you are doing that with somebody who y'all are not on the same page, or even worse, y'all don't even really love each other like that, you don't even really like each other like that, it can become very disastrous. So I believe that that's very important to think about. And when it comes to intimacy, like boundaries, and just knowing your body physically as a woman, like for example, like when you grow up unprepared for like dating and intimacy and all that, a lot of times you're not taught about things when it comes to like sexuality. So you're gonna have to like learn as you go. You can read books, that's also important too. It's important to read books and to be educated. But it's really helpful when you have a mother or aunt or older sister, somebody who actually has been intimate, who has dated, even if they never actually maybe have had sexual intimacy, but they've had other forms of intimacy, or they've at least dated. They can like kind of talk to you about some of their experiences, and they can talk to you about real life scenarios. Because you could read a book all day, but what about the real life scenarios? Sometimes like here on YouTube, like a lot of people will try to teach you things, and it's like, okay, that sounds cool, but in theory, that's not actually going to work, because when you're actually dating a guy, like that's not how things really pan out. So it's important sometimes to have those real life scenarios and stories. So it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So if I'm in a situation like that with a guy, even though it may not go exactly like that, right? Because every guy is different, but at least there's like certain like common themes that you may run into. And now you kind of have an idea of how to like deal with that when it comes. But I think that the thing that matters the most when it comes to being prepared for intimacy is doing the work on yourself. I think that that's what matters the most because you can read the books all day long. You can do that all day long. You can watch the YouTube videos, but if you haven't done the internal work, when you go out there and you date real men, like real live men, not like just a theory, is actually real life, you're gonna still make certain decisions that you may not want to make because you haven't done the internal work. So the internal work is still very important. And I think that's what a lot of people avoid because that's the part that is the least sexy, right? It's the least juicy. It's the hard, gritty stuff that you don't want to do. So I think that that's basically important. You know, if you struggle with um a low view of yourself, if you struggle with even just like being able to talk about intimacy and being able to talk about basically um, your likes and your dislikes. 'Cause so for example, if you get married, you're gonna have to be comfortable with being able to tell your husband, like, "Hey, I don't like this," or "Hey, I like this more," or "Hey, that's uncomfortable, or that hurts," or "I don't really like it when we do that," or "Can we do more of this?" or whatever. Like, but if you're not comfortable with your body, you're not comfortable with yourself, you're not comfortable with speaking up, you don't have boundaries, it's gonna be difficult, and you're gonna be in a situation where even if he's a good guy, you may not be getting your needs met in the bedroom with your husband, even though he may be a good husband, or vice versa. Like he may be trying to teach you things, but because you're so like fearful and because you're so like uncomfortable with your body, you may not be able to really do it. Or if you do it, you're going to be so uncomfortable and that's going to affect the experience. So I think that those things are important factors to think about if you have a husband and, um, you may want to go out to certain places to eat and you can vocalize that, right? You can vocalize what you like and what you don't like. When y'all are in your marriage and there's certain financial things that you may not agree with, you could speak up, I'm not saying yelling and screaming and insulting him, but in a respectful way, you can say, I don't agree with this. Or even if there's things that's going on in the marriage that you would hope, right, that these things won't happen, but like cheating or disrespect or whatever, like as far as I'm talking about like major disrespect. I'm not talking about like things that maybe was said on your end or his end that you didn't intend to be disrespectful, but it was talked about and resolved. That's going to happen too. Because it even happens in friendships, it happens in all forms of relationships. But I think that like the major things like cheating, or other things like that, it's easier, I feel like, for you to walk away or to separate or to whatever it is that you feel led to do when you've done the work. But when you haven't done the work and you're very like codependent or you're very like kind of not able to really stand up for yourself when it comes to dealing with men on a romantic level, it can be difficult. And then another thing is that sometimes you tend to attract um, guys that may not always have the best intentions as well, because men are not stupid. They can pick up on women who may be weak in certain areas when it comes to dating and intimacy. So that's why also I believe that it's important basically to do the work when when trying to date. And that's one thing that I wish I would have done. I wish I would have, because I started like when I was like around 18 or so, like about to turn 18, around that time, 18. So I was a late bloomer, and that's another video for another day. But for me, I wasn't ready to be dating. I wasn't ready to be intimate. I wasn't ready for any of those things. But I had such a desperation of, oh, I want to be in a relationship. I want a boyfriend. I want a boy to like me, because I didn't have those experiences as a teenager. I didn't have a boyfriend like other girls had a boyfriend when they were 11 or 12 or 13, like little puppy love type of stuff that they talk about. And I'm not saying that you can't be like 15 and 16 with an actual real relationship. But when you're like really young, a lot of times you really don't know what you're getting yourself into. And unless you're like an older teen, like about to turn 17, 18, even then, a lot of times you don't even know who you are. So you just have to be really careful with that. And I guess in some ways I was kind of saved from that, because I would see like girls like go through tears and different things as a teenager. And that's kind of a lot to have to deal with at age 14, 15. But I think that if you if you get to know boys in a healthy way without the intimacy and without all the extra stuff, you can actually learn a lot so that when you do start dating in your early 20s or whatever, you're kind of already prepared. You're comfortable being around boys. You're comfortable with setting boundaries. You're comfortable with just expressing your femininity and flirting and doing it in a way that's safe and comfortable for you. You've already learned that. But when you're a late bloomer and you've been so sheltered and nobody really taught you how to date, now you're kind of going out there as a young adult and you're just kind of like learning the hard way and going through trial and error. And all that does is kind of lead to a lot of hurt and pain sometimes. Some people go through the opposite where they become so sheltered where they just are literally isolated and they don't date at all. So I think that that's the downside of it. I mean, I know that guardians and parents and whoever raised you wanted the best for you and they tried to shelter you, but too much sheltering can also cause issues as well. So there has to be like a balance. And when it comes to marriage, yeah, I wasn't really taught on how a guy should court you towards marriage, what marriage looks like. I didn't have any example of that in the home of a healthy marriage. My parents weren't together. My mother passed away when I was 10. My father wasn't in the home. So it just really wasn't any example of that. My grandmother was not with her husband, and my great grandmother wasn't. I don't know if my great grandmother ever got married, but there wasn't really any examples of that, and nobody was really teaching me practical things. I mean, how could they if they also didn't have the experience and the tools, right? People can only teach you what they know and what they've experienced. So it's kind of like a little disingenuous when people say like, "Oh, well, you should stop doing this, or you should be married by now. You should." Well, how can people do that unless they have been also raised to know those things? And if not, then they have to parent themselves, and that doesn't work for the average person. Like usually, you will go through experiences first and then realize, okay, yeah, that doesn't work. Um, and then you may not even really know if that's even really what you want. I remember I used to want children so bad. And then as I got older and when I started dating and stuff, I was like, I don't even know if I want children anymore, so because I wasn't even sure. That's not something that I was ever really taught on how to be a mother. I was given I was basically put in situations where I had to like kind of like be in a mommy role sometimes, but that wasn't really by choice. I wasn't really based on like, oh, I'm going to teach you this so one day you could become a mother. It's more so like, oh, well, we need somebody to watch and help rear the child. So this is going to be a role, even though it wasn't said, but that's the role that I fell into. So I had a taste of kind of like what motherhood would be like, but it wasn't so much like a good experience like, oh, I'm just learning this just so I can be a mother one day. It's more so like this is what you do when you're in a family where we don't have the means to get a babysitter and all that type of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a form of parentified role. And some women kind of can relate to what I'm talking about with that. But, yeah, when I got older and I started actually interacting with men, not just in theory, like, "Oh, one day I would just love to be married, have children," just like a fantasy, like just an idea in your mind. No, like now you're starting to actually date actual live men and you're seeing how they move and you're seeing the things that they say and the things that they do or the things that they don't say, right? That leave you kind of confused and leave you in limbo and nobody really taught you about that. So you're like, I don't know what's going on here. And then you start to think, do I really want to have children? Especially in situations like this? Do I really want to bring children in situations like this? So it really makes you start to question some of those like they call it like limerence when you like have like these like ideas in your mind of like, oh, like all this wishing and hoping and imagination. And women who've been through a lot of trauma tend to have like a lot of limerence and stuff like that. Like imagining yourself being married, and imagine yourself having children and walking down the aisle. You may not even be anywhere close to that. You may not even be in a relationship that's even healthy, but you have these like ideas in your mind of limerence because it makes you feel good. And that's another conversation too for another day because I could talk about that. There's people online who talk about these things, but I don't think that they've ever actually really experienced it. But I think it's different when you've actually experienced trauma and you've actually experienced these things and you can speak about it from basically from experience, right? And um how it can basically affect you when you're dating and being intimate with men. So to wrap this up, I don't want to have this video too long because I can talk for a while, but I think it's important to be able to be comfortable with talking about intimacy, being comfortable with, your different parts of your body, reproductive system as a woman, being comfortable with the idea of being curious about intimacy, so you can basically freely talk about it, talk about boundaries and love and safety and vulnerability, talking about like what to expect. So even if like you're being raised in a religious home and they want you to wait till marriage, but that still doesn't prepare you by just saying wait till marriage, because they haven't taught you any boundaries. They haven't taught you how to interact when you are in situations where you're trying to wait, how to date while being abstinent. I wasn't taught any of those things, so it was like you're not prepared at all. And then you're just trying to go off of willpower, like, oh, if I just think positive and I just don't, be intimate with guys and just wait till marriage will just happen. And that doesn't really happen for the average person, without support from their parents or their guardians, without having an example, without giving practical tools, without doing the internal work so that you know how to set boundaries. You're okay with being alone. You're okay with not compromising. Like all those things come into play. And like I mentioned before, like have how you see yourself, the self view that you have of yourself, of your value, and basically what you're going to put up with and what you're not going to put up with. Like all those things play a role when you do the internal work. It's not just, oh, don't date until you're this, or don't be intimate until that, or just do this or just do that, without any practical tools, without any support, without any example, without any internal work. Encouraging you on how to do that so that you can then, when you go out and you are interacting with guys, you can move in a certain way that is safe and healthy for you. And I just want to say lastly that be very careful of some of the advice on here, because sometimes like there's a lot of like content that is kind of geared towards how to like get money out of men, or how to get these things out of them, dating quote unquote high value men. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because a man has a certain amount of money or status that he's a good person, that he's safe. And I think that we should know this by now based on all the things that have been exposed. And see, me, I'm not surprised by the things that have been exposed by these quote unquote high value men and entertainment and all that, because I've been learning about this stuff since I was a child. I was a free thinker since I was a child, and I was the type of person that would go down rabbit holes and conspiracy theories to learn about things that was going on in the entertainment industry and in the world in general. So none of this stuff surprised me. It actually just reconfirms the things that I've been learning since I was young, when people would just say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. That's not really real. These people are not doing that stuff in the entertainment industry, and all this stuff that people were saying, because people didn't want to believe that some of these things were true. So none of it surprises me. They are unhealthy and evil and unsafe men in all demographics, in all races, in all cultural groups, in all socioeconomic status. So just because you date somebody who has a certain level of status does not mean that just because they're giving you money and things that the relationship is going to be healthy. But on the flip side, also, just because you deal with a man who doesn't have money or who isn't working doesn't mean that he's not going to harm you either. So there has to be like a very balanced view on how men are and how men work, because otherwise you are very extreme in your thinking, because you have people on the other end like, well, I just won't deal with high value men because look how crazy they are. Look at what they're doing to women with the money that they have. And then they'll go deal with a man who doesn't have money, and they get bamboozled too, right? So I think that you have to have wisdom and discernment in all things. And you need to make sure that you are not having these extreme levels of thinking, that you're coming from a clear head and a clear heart, and you are able to come from a place of emotional regulation when you're making decisions based on men. A lot of women were not emotionally regulated. Oh, I'll choose the bear over the man and all these things. And I get it, because there's a lot of things that have been happening to women across the world. So I get it. But we have to make sure that we're careful of these messages, because they can get us really riled up, enraged, and fearful, and all these different things. And it's like you can't walk in fear and rage and hate and disgust and all these different unsafe, unhealthy emotions while still wanting to date men. Like that's not how it works. Now, if you should completely want to just cut off men and not date ever again, that's your choice. Just know that that comes with its own stuff, just like dating comes with its own stuff, right? Like nothing is going to be perfect, and everything comes with a sacrifice. So that's why I said having a clear mind and a clear head, and any decisions that you make is going to be really important. And you have to be careful what you're listening to, because some of these things of, oh, go after this man so you can get this and that, can actually put you in danger. So you have to be very careful. I would never suggest basically trying to play men out of their money, trying to scheme them using potions and different types of things to try to like get over on them. Those things can backfire on you. You're dealing with the spiritual realm. You don't know what you're touching. All these different things I would not suggest to do. And if you gotta do all of that, then maybe it's not meant for you to deal with that man in the first place. Because if a man really wants to give you something, he's gonna give it to you. Of course, you have to bring some type of value and some type of because men are not stupid. They're not going to just give you something just for nothing, right? So you have to bring something, but you don't have to jump through hoops and do all this manipulation and lying to get it. And you also don't have to do a potion or witchcraft in order to get him to fall for you either. Those things rarely ever work out well, and they can actually put you or your own people in harm's way. So I would never suggest that. I think that it's just very important to move from a place of honesty as much as possible. You don't have to tell a guy everything, but whatever he needs to know. And then, and that's just the way that I move now. I haven't always moved that way. I never was like a vindictive person. I never was the type to go out of my way to get over on a guy. That never was my thing. But I was very toxic in certain ways and I was causing harm in certain ways. So I had to start doing the work on myself to minimize the harm that I was causing. And also so that I wouldn't be harmed as well, right? Continuing to be harmed in relationships with guys because I wasn't in a healthy space. So therefore I was attracting men that were harming me, whether or not it was intentional or not. So as you grow and as you do the work, you tend to attract better, but you also tend to move better with how you treat people as well, right? So all those things are important. It just kind of wheels back into the whole thing of doing the internal work. And that's how you get the better treatment. But you also have to be honest about men and just how it is. Like, and that could be another conversation too. So let me know how you have experience with dating and intimacy if you weren't basically raised on practical tools and how to be prepared for it, and let me know how that affected you and what have you done to basically do the internal work so that you can have better experiences with dating and intimacy as a woman. Maybe some of you have success stories. You got married, or it worked out well for you. You met an amazing man, even though you weren't raised well, even though you may have been raised in unhealthy environments when it came to dating and intimacy, and you have a success story. So if you want to share that as well, whatever you feel led and comfortable to share, you don't have to share a lot of details, anything, nothing that would put you in a situation where your information is like, out there and you don't feel safe. But if you feel like to share, definitely share in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe and comment and like, and I will come back with another video soon. Take care. Bye.